Hey everyone, my name is Arnav Goswami, and today I'm going to talk to you about the ransomware attack that occurred at Tyler Technologies earlier this year. So, the first question that you may have is, who is Tyler Technologies? And Tyler Technologies is a company based in Plano, Texas that provides software services to the public sector, including financial and tax related applications, public safety alerts, educational software, as well as record management from various sectors, ranging from collecting utility payments to managing public schools as bus routes. On September 23rd of 2020, Krebs Security reported that Tyler Technologies was the subject of a ransomware attack, which occurred after an unauthorized individual was able to access Tyler Technologies' internal systems. Clients of Tyler Technologies also reported unauthorized login attempts to their systems, and this heavily impacted many of the public operations that Tyler Technologies managed for public sector companies. This was done via ransom EXX, which we will get into in more depth later on, but basically all of their files were encrypted with a special key until they paid a sum of money or found out how to decrypt it. Next, we'll talk about the attacker's motivation. So since this was a ransomware attack that was conducted on Tyler Technologies, the attacker's primary goal was to retrieve money from Tyler Technologies, which they ended up being successful at doing. We'll cover that more later when we talk about the consequences and the actual attack method. However, there was a few other important factors to consider due to the fact that Tyler Technologies works with mainly the public sector and the government. So as CS Hub reported, this attack occurred just months before the election, and since Tyler Technologies handles lots of information related to the voter registration and related to elections, people were scared at first that this attack could have been done in order to impact the election or perhaps to delete voter registration information or change it maliciously and harm the results. Thankfully, this did not end up being the case, but it was something that was really important at first before the news broke that it was just simple ransomware attack. Additionally, as we stated earlier, Tyler Technologies handles lots of sensitive information, so this was very important. And Tyler Technologies software directly impacts how many government programs operate. For example, if you were an individual who had to make a court payment, who had to pay a utility bill such as electrical bill or water bill, you may have had a hard time because the systems were down. So for example, if you had an electrical payment that was due at 10:30 in the morning, but the system was down at the time and you couldn't make the payment, you might have no electricity until the problem is resolved and you're allowed to finally make your payment. This also could impact the school bus routes, as well as several other operations that we mentioned earlier that Tyler Technologies works with. So now to move on to the actual attack method itself, which was Ransom EXX. Ransom EXX is most known as being a relative of Defray 777, and it's pretty new, and it's been used to attack many public sector organizations in Texas in the past year, so Tyler Technologies was not the first breach. The way the attack plays out is basically an attacker will be able to forge identification and email, say, a distribution list of employees at Tyler Technologies or some other company, claiming to either be a prospective client and looking to seek more information, or perhaps by hacking the email of an actual client and using that in order to email them and fake their identity. Once they're able to fake their identity, they're able to attach a Windows file, a Windows document, or a Microsoft Word document to an email, and they're able to send it to these employees. Once an employee opens this file, they're able to spread malware throughout their computer, and they're able to authenticate themselves as a Tyler Technologies employee and take control of all of their systems. This allows the attackers to encrypt all of the information that Tyler Technologies has in their file systems and their computers and shut down these systems. And the only person that has a key to decrypt it is the attackers. So what they will do now is they'll approach Tyler Technologies or whoever the ransomware attacker was attacking and tell them that they will either delete their information, leak it, or keep it locked if they don't pay them some sum of money. And this type of money typically ranges based on how much revenue the company does. They pick a very specific number that they know the company will be able to pay. So in Tyler Technologies' case, with the fact that they do tens of millions of revenue every year, it's very likely that the undisclosed sum was a large amount of money. Next, let's discuss the consequences. So the first and probably the most obvious consequence of this is that Tyler Technologies, as CRN was the first of many to report, actually ended up needing to pay the attackers in order to get their systems back online and the government operations back and running as fast as possible. Therefore, this represented a large financial loss for Tyler Technologies, and while we don't know the actual amount as it was undisclosed, it's likely that we're talking millions and millions of dollars. However, while Tyler Technologies was the primary victim of this, there were many other victims. The next most important victim were the government and public sector operations that were using Tyler Technologies software services in order to provide services to their residents. So therefore, there was a loss of use of the government services for many of these companies, and because of that, that leads us to the third level victim of this, and that is the actual residents and the people of Texas who were dependent on services provided from Tyler Technologies. If they were unable to pay their water bills or their utility bills or their electrical bills, and they lost power, or perhaps they just lost the convenience for a while, they were also a victim of this attack. So you can say that this attack was really had three levels, with Tyler Technologies bearing the most official and known consequence, and the government sectors that use their services, software services, having the second level of consequence, and then of course the residents who were dependent on these were also damaged by it. However, Tyler Technologies also faced many other consequences, and one of these is the loss of trust. Because of the fact that the government sector, which deals with very sensitive information all the time that needs to stay up and running 24/7, was shut down because of Tyler Technologies falling for a ransomware attack, many of their clients were very upset and began to stop trusting them. Because of this, many of the government organizations chose to switch their software provider either by preemptively terminating their contracts with Tyler Technologies or by deciding that once it goes up for renewal again, they will not go back with Tyler Technologies. Additionally, many prospective clients who may have been thinking of working with Tyler Technologies may have been turned off by this, and this will likely harm them for many years to come until they provide an adequate solution or have proven themselves that they won't fall guilty to this again. However, finally, what may be the most important consequence that Tyler Technologies faced is that they now have a known payer status in the ransomware community. Typically, if people don't pay a ransom or if they're able to find a way to decrypt the keys on their own, attackers won't really go after them again because what's the point? They know that they won't be able to get any money out of them. However, Tyler Technologies did end up paying the ransom. So now they have a target on their back saying that, hey, if we're able to somehow breach them again and perform another ransomware attack, it's very likely that they'll end up paying us yet another time. So this really harmed them, and we'll see what happens. As of now, everything is so far so good, but it's possible that they may be the target of another ransomware attack in the future just because of this known payer status. So, in conclusion, while this attack was not the most technologically advanced attempt at cybercrime, simply just faking your identity and gaining authentication, it does go to show what a serious impact such a simple action, such as clicking a malicious link or downloading a malicious file, can have. Tyler Technologies' initial response consisted of them telling all of their clients to change their passwords, as well as all of their employees. However, this did not end up being a permanent solution as they were forced to pay a ransom. By paying this ransom, it is possible that Tyler Technologies opened them up to future attacks, as I must say, and additionally, they lost many of their clients. When asked who bears responsibility for this attack, it's clear that Tyler Technologies bears full responsibility, although the issue ultimately began due to a single employee. It's similar to how in a football game, even if every player typically has a bad game and they lose the game, the quarterback and the coach end up taking the most heat for it because they are the ones who are expected to make the difference and they're the ones who usually reap the most reward whenever things are going right. So as of October 9, 2020, Tyler Technologies has provided a statement saying that they have completed their investigation and that all activities are back to normal. I think the major lesson learned for Tyler Technologies is that in any software services company, especially one that deals with such fragile information, such as government information, there need to be various checks and balances in place in order to prevent future attacks from happening of the same nature. And I believe that, and also what Tyler Technologies said they'll be looking into, is going for proper, adequate employee training measures. For example, their employees have to know how to know when they can trust someone, when they can open an email, or perhaps even be trained not to open links and files and emails and send them to a higher up who's able to verify them. Because there was one simple thing that could have stopped this attack in a heartbeat, and that solution would have been not opening the malicious Microsoft Word document that was in an email, and none of this would have happened. Or they wouldn't have lost lots of their business, they wouldn't have harmed public sector organizations, they wouldn't have taken such a financial blow from having to pay the ransom, and they wouldn't have gotten a known payer status on their back. So it's clear that Tyler Technologies really needs to employ adequate training measures in order to prevent these attacks from happening, and that is the main lesson learned. So finally, I have a couple of questions to ask you. So the first is, what is an additional step that Tyler Technologies can take in order to prevent further ransomware attacks without compromising client relationships or trust or training employees to seldom open emailed files? Additionally, do you believe that Tyler Technologies was smart in choosing to pay the ransom? And since they're now known to attackers as being as a known payer, do you believe that it was worth it for them to pay the ransom or not, and why? And finally, here are my sources. Thank you.